As we get older, we all go through changes, some physical and others mental or emotional. We've all heard the phrase aging gracefully, but let's be honest, not everyone ages as gracefully as we might hope. There are things that happen in old age that many people notice but don't talk about, sometimes because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and other times because it's just uncomfortable to discuss. Today, let's take an honest look at 15 things people often do as they age that everyone notices, but no one wants to mention. It's time to face reality and see what really happens as we grow older, with facts and stories to help understand the full picture. One of the first things we often see in older adults is their tendency to stop taking care of themselves. Personal hygiene is important, not just for our health, but also for our self-esteem. Yet, as we age, this can be one of the first things to slip. Daily care routines may fade, and some may stop brushing their teeth regularly, taking showers as often, or maintaining their appearance. This decline in self-care isn't just about appearance, it can be a sign of deeper issues like depression or physical limitations. A case study of an elderly woman named Dorothy illustrates this well. Dorothy had always been a proud woman, always well-dressed with her hairstyle perfectly. But as she entered her late 70s, her daily self-care routine started to slip. Her children noticed she stopped brushing her hair and was often found in dirty clothes, neglecting basic hygiene. While no one wanted to bring it up, it was clear that Dorothy was struggling with her mental health, and it showed in her physical appearance. It wasn't that she didn't care anymore, but rather that the effort became overwhelming. Another uncomfortable aspect of aging is how people often become more set in their ways. Older individuals, especially those over 80, tend to develop rigid routines and habits that can be hard for others to understand. They've been doing things the same way for decades, and over time, they become less willing to change, even when the world around them does. Take Harold, for example. At 82, he refused to use a cell phone. He didn't want to learn how to use it and resisted any attempts from his kids to show him how texting could make life easier. It wasn't that Harold didn't understand how texting could make life easier and safer, but he was adamant, saying, "Why fix what isn't broken?" with frustration in his voice. Harold wasn't being difficult on purpose, he just felt comfortable in his old ways. The problem with this inflexibility is that it often leads to isolation. Harold would often miss out on family events simply because he refused to use modern technology, which could have helped him stay connected. The stubbornness that can come with aging often separates people from the very things that could keep them feeling young and involved. Another common but rarely discussed issue in old age is how older adults sometimes become overly dependent on others. While needing help as we get older is natural, it can sometimes become excessive. Inevitable, the degree to which some individuals rely on their children or caregivers can be overwhelming. Take Ruth, a 78-year-old woman whose children felt as though they were on call 24/7. Ruth had grown accustomed to her children's constant presence, calling them for even the smallest of tasks, such as reaching a can on a high shelf. The dependency wasn't rooted in any medical need, rather, it was a learned behavior. Ruth had become so accustomed to being waited on hand and foot that she didn't know how to function without constant attention. It became a burden, not just for her children but for Ruth herself, who lost the ability to do simple tasks she once could do on her own. It's an uncomfortable truth. While aging brings its fair share of challenges, some people exacerbate the problem by refusing to maintain their independence. This dynamic of dependency can lead to frustration and resentment, yet it's rarely addressed because people don't want to offend the elderly. As people age, their patience tends to wear thinner. While this is natural to some extent, after all, life can be tiring, it can also manifest in ways that strain relationships. Take the case of Thomas, a 70-year-old man who had always been a kind, patient soul. But in his later years, Thomas found himself snapping at his family for the smallest things. His daughter, Emily, was visiting one day when she accidentally spilled a glass of water on the floor. Normally, Thomas would have brushed it off, but this time he exploded. "Why can't you be more careful? I've asked you 100 times," he shouted. Emily was shocked by his outburst, as this was a side of her father she had never seen before. It wasn't just the occasional moment of frustration, it was a pattern. Aging seemed to rob him of his patience, turning him into a much more irritable version of himself. It's painful to witness a person change in this way, but it's a reality many families face. The loss of patience can affect not just the individual but everyone around them. Another thing that happens in old age is that many older adults begin to get a little more selfish. They might not intend to, but the shift often occurs as they feel they have earned the right to put their needs first. This can manifest in subtle ways, such as demanding more attention or expecting others to accommodate their preferences, even when it's inconvenient. Consider Sarah, a 75-year-old woman who insisted on having dinner at exactly 6 p.m. every evening, no matter what. She expected her family to drop everything to meet her schedule. Her son, James, found it increasingly difficult to keep up with her demands, but Sarah wasn't understanding. She would frequently comment, "I've lived my life, now it's time for you to adjust to me." While Sarah had certainly earned the right to enjoy her golden years, her selfishness made it hard for others to connect with her in the same way. This isn't a universal rule, but it's a common behavior that comes with aging. People sometimes feel they are entitled to more, even if it means stepping on others' toes. Old age also brings about a loss of filter. Older adults often speak their minds more freely than they used to, and while this can be refreshing in some cases, it can also be hurtful. Take the example of George, a 79-year-old man who never hesitated to offer unsolicited opinions. "That outfit makes you look older than you are," he once told his niece. "You should really consider getting a facelift, it'll make you look so much better." His niece was taken aback by his comment. She hadn't asked for his advice, and certainly not in such a blunt manner. But George's lack of a filter became more pronounced as he aged. He had stopped caring about social niceties, thinking that since he was older, people should just accept whatever came out of his mouth. While some might admire his honesty, many found his remarks rude and hurtful. This loss of tact is often overlooked, but it can cause lasting damage to relationships. Then there's the way aging affects memory. Everyone knows that forgetfulness is a natural part of getting older, but the extent to which it affects some people can be alarming. Take Linda, a 68-year-old woman who had always been sharp, but in her mid-60s, she started forgetting things more frequently: dates, appointments, and even the names of people she had known for years. At first, it was a mild inconvenience, but as time went on, Linda's forgetfulness became more troubling. She would repeat the same stories multiple times during a conversation, not realizing she had already shared them. Her children were patient at first, but over time, it became difficult to watch Linda struggle with this decline. Forgetting important details is one thing, forgetting how to have a meaningful conversation is something else entirely. It's a painful reminder of how aging can steal even the most cherished faculties. Aging also brings with it a tendency to become overly nostalgic. While reminiscing about the past can be comforting, sometimes it becomes an obsession. Take the case of Helen, a 72-year-old woman who constantly talked about the good old days. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the past, with Helen recounting stories of how things used to be. While this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, it became difficult for her friends and family to engage with her. They wanted to talk about their current lives, their challenges, and the future, but Helen was stuck in a time that had long passed. The obsession with the past can make it hard for others to connect with the present, and it can prevent older adults from enjoying the present moment. Another common issue that arises in old age is a lack of awareness about one's own limitations. As we grow older, it is natural to want to maintain independence and continue living life as we always have. However, the reality is that both physical and mental abilities often deteriorate with age, sometimes in subtle ways. This decline can make it difficult for individuals to recognize that they can no longer do certain tasks as easily or safely as they once could. One of the most common ways this manifests is through an overestimation of one's capabilities, which can lead to risky and dangerous situations. Take the case of Charles, an 84-year-old man who had been driving for decades without issue. Charles had always prided himself on being self-sufficient, and despite the fact that his vision had been deteriorating over time, he refused to admit that he was no longer fit to drive. His family members noticed that he had begun to struggle with basic tasks, such as reading street signs or seeing traffic lights clearly, but every time they gently suggested he stop driving, he would brush off their concerns. Charles was adamant that he was still fine and could manage on his own. He couldn't bear the thought of losing his independence, so he continued driving, convinced that his ability hadn't changed. One afternoon, while Charles was driving to the grocery store, he failed to notice a car stopped in front of him at a red light. Unable to judge the distance properly, he rear-ended the vehicle, causing a minor accident. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the shock of the incident left Charles shaken. His family was horrified, not only because of the accident itself but also because it highlighted just how unaware Charles had become of his own limitations. The crash served as a wake-up call for both Charles and his family. The incident forced him to confront the fact that his decline had reached a point where he could no longer safely operate a vehicle. Unfortunately, this scenario is not unique. It is all too common for elderly individuals to either deny or fail to recognize their limitations, particularly when it comes to tasks that are integral to their independence. Whether it's driving, walking, or even climbing stairs, many elderly people continue to push themselves beyond what their bodies are capable of handling. This reluctance to accept the reality of aging not only puts their own safety at risk but also the safety of others around them. It's a delicate balance, wanting to preserve independence while also acknowledging the need for help and adjusting to the changes that come with aging. In short, aging is a journey that comes with its challenges. While many aspects of old age are beautiful and full of wisdom, there are undeniably ugly truths that people don't always want to talk about. These include a decline in self-care, stubbornness, dependency, impatience, selfishness, a loss of filter, forgetfulness, nostalgia, and a lack of awareness about personal limitations. These changes may be difficult to witness, but they are a part of life. It's important to address them openly, to help those who are aging navigate the challenges with grace and dignity, and to provide support where needed. After all, just because something is uncomfortable to talk about doesn't mean it should remain unspoken. If you found value in this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to catch all our latest content. Thanks for watching.